Hi there, welcome to Floating in Books, and today we're going to be talking about my reading wrap-up for end of December-ish until just this weekend. So about less than 2 months of reading. It's more like 6 weeks or so. So welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. On here, I like to come once a week to chat about books and lifestyle related things, including fashion, but I've been doing a lot of bookish content and I'm loving it again. I've really found my groove again with reading, and that will also goes to show when we're chatting about how many books I actually read. Now, I do have to say that a lot of it was audiobooks, which I don't have physically, so I'll just pop a picture up on the screen, and I only finished 3 physical copies, but one of those is quite a big one, so that's why it took me a bit longer to be able to update you again and to let you know about it. So let me whiz through the physical copies first, and then we'll get to the audiobooks so we can talk about that. But just to let you know, in case you're curious, I read 2 books still in 2022, and then I've already finished another 6 books in 2023. So in total, I've read 8 books under it's just over a book per week, so I'm really happy with it. I'm about to finish another book and I've already started a new one. We're doing great. So the first book I finished towards the end of December, this was between Christmas and New Year's, was Richard Osman's The Man Who Died Twice. This is the second book in the Thursday Murder Club series. I already read the first one, and then my friends gifted me this for my very belated birthday party. My birthday is in July, and I didn't celebrate it until November. So they got me this because they knew I enjoyed the first one, and now I have books 2 and 3 to read. And I wanted to read this as a palate cleanser because I started where did it go? Here, the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson, and if I read too much fantasy one after another, my mind goes a little crazy, so I needed a palate cleanser, and this was perfect for it. Now, my friend already told me that this was his favorite out of the 3 that are out in this series so far, and I think, of course I haven't read the third one yet, but this was better than the first one, for sure. The first one, we are introduced to our main group of characters, the Thursday Murder Club, and this refers to 4 pensioners who start solving unsolved crimes, and then one day an actual murder happens and they become involved. This book kind of continues that line. We've had that case, and of course we get a new case, but there's other things going on here as well. We have, an ex-husband who comes back from the dead. We have one of our pensioners who's sadly mugged at some point. They get involved with the local drug community. They are trying to set up a police officer with, someone as well. There's romance, there's a little bit of everything. There's a lot of banter in this, and it's this really dry English humor. This plot kept moving at all times. I have to say that the twist at the end wasn't my favorite, which is why I did knock it down a star, but I did rate this 4 stars in the end on Goodreads. And then after loving the first installment of the Mistborn trilogy so much, I knew I had to get started with this straight away, so just after New Year's, I got stuck into the well of Ascension. And this is the reason why I didn't do a reading wrap-up in January, because I wanted to make sure that I could include this in a reading wrap-up. This is a 750-page book. This is big. And his books only get bigger as this world expands. And that does have me worried, because this was not my favorite. Let me see. Let me see how many stars I rated it. This was a 4-star read for me because I did like a lot of it. Again, towards the end of the book, we get much more action than in the first 2/3 of the book, which was the case in the first book as well. So I was kind of prepared for that. But that one was a 5-star read for me. And I don't award books 5 stars very easily. I do have to say I'm quite picky with the stars. And this was good, but it's so long, and I do feel, let's just say that at this point, I don't understand why all of it had to happen. There was a twist towards the end of this story that I found very convenient, and a bit of an easy cop-out, which is another reason why I didn't give this 5 stars, but most of this book is people stuck in rooms talking to each other about politics. That's what this is about, and even though I like a good deal of politics, the politics in this world just aren't that exciting. They're just not. So I'm really curious to see what the third book is going to be, because I hope a lot of the political intrigue that we get in this story, that is used in the third book. But when I went into this, given the name of the book, The Well of Ascension, the sort of note that the first book ends on and how this starts, I thought this was going to be a quest. So the first book was a heist. The second book I thought was gonna be a quest, like long stretches of land and this journey to try and find the Well of Ascension. But that's just like a sub plot line, and we don't get that much travel. Like I said, most of these characters are just stuck in one place, and there's just a lot of arguing and a lot of politics going on, and I didn't really enjoy that part of the book, which is why I felt this was even more difficult to get through than the first one. And I was hoping that this would be as rewarding as the first one, where I was like so happy that I stuck with it and I didn't DNF it like halfway through the book. This did get better, but I felt that there was just too much happening in the last 150 pages of this one, where I feel some of those things could have been sprinkled in earlier in the story so that we get more from that perspective or more with that storyline. And I just felt it was just so much of nothing and a lot of like things that intrigue that like wasn't even resolved in the end. So I was a bit disappointed with this. It was still good. I really, really like the characters, and this is very much a character-driven story, so if you can stick with the characters and you love them, I love Vin, I really do. For all of her flaws and all of her uncertainties, I really liked Vin. I also like Ayland, I like Ham, I like Breeze, I like the whole gang in here, and I really, really enjoyed the book from that perspective, which is why I ended up giving it 4-star, but plot-wise, I felt it just could have done a bit more. So that's why this was 4 stars and not 5. I'm still looking forward to The Hero of Ages, which is the third book in the trilogy, and I really hope we can come to some conclusions there. It is just a tad shorter than this. It's 720 pages, so it's about 40 pages shorter than this is. But yeah, I'm just sort of like this like high fantasy realm thing. I'm sort of like not into it at the moment. So that's why I first want to get to some other books before I get to that. But I think sometime in March I will probably pick it up and then make that my book for the month. Because this, I can only read about 50 to 100 pages at a given time with this. So it did take me some time to get through it. Because it's just a lot to take in one sitting. This is just not the kind of fantasy story where you just fly through it. You definitely need to digest things after you've read it as well. So liked it, but didn't love it. And then the final book I finished just this last weekend, and of course I had to read this. I know. So Prince Harry wrote a book. It's very similar to the Netflix series, in case you were wondering. It's called Spare, which caused a lot of controversy, and a lot of people are saying, like, should he have done this? And I don't know, I get from his perspective, like, of course we get the whole thing from his perspective, so that's the downside of this. I think I gave it 3 stars because, writing-wise, I'm sure he worked with a ghostwriter for this, and it's like written like he's telling it to you, so it's very sort of conversational. It's super quick and easy to read because of that, but boy has issues, and he hasn't dealt with all of them, it seems. So I'm very curious to see where his life is going to go into the future, and what he ends up doing. He's very well aware of his privilege, and I think that as he grew older and the more he realized how absurd his life was, the more he also started to almost fight against it, and he couldn't escape it, and that's what he ultimately, of course, tried to do. And I think he still hasn't really gotten over a lot of the trauma from his childhood. So yeah, this book was like, I just, wanted to, I was just curious, but yeah, if you did see the Netflix series that they did on there, a lot of the story that is about them together, him and Meghan together, it's very similar as what's in the Netflix series, but we get more of a glimpse into his childhood and how he's experienced like growing up within the royal family. And yeah, it just, I don't know, it's just a lot of sibling rivalry and a lot of like just unsupportive toxic relationships. That's pretty much what this is. Like it's it's like very abusive as well, what he's gone through. So I can understand if this is truly how everything happened, then I can understand why he decided to flee. But I also think that all of it is, of course, from his perspective. And I think if his dad or William would actually, you know, write a story like it, which they're never ever gonna do, I think, that we would get a very different take on things, because it's very much sort of like, these are my reasons and this is why I wanted to do what I did, and that's really the underlying factor here. There's nothing here from like another perspective other than his. So I do think that that's what you need to realize if you were to read this, that I'm not saying take everything with a grain of salt. I mean, sure, but there's multiple perspective and a lot of players in this story that we don't get to hear. So that's something you definitely need to take into account when reading this. But I think, you know, is it smart that he did this? I can't be the judge of that. Time will tell. But I hope he's happy and that he finds happiness in his life. That's all I can say here. So yeah, this was 3 stars. It was quick, easy. There were some really tedious passages here. But yeah, I don't think there were many revelations in here that were overly shocking. I think if you were shocked by this, then you really have been living under a rock. That's the only thing I can say here. So those were the physical copies that I read. Also, between Christmas and New Year's, I read a Dutch audiobook, which is again by Thijs Launspach. I read his other book on audio before that at the end of 2022. It's called Je bent al genoeg, and it's sort of a continuation of the first one. I like the first one better than this. This just was repetitive, and it was very sort of similar to what he was already trying to say in the first book, so this wasn't my favorite. But yeah, you know, it's like, it's mental illness. It's like not self-help, but it's sort of like about mental health and how you can take care of yourself. So I always like listen to these things to hopefully get one nugget out of it, but most of the time I find these like self-help kind of things to be a bit of an open door. Then I also read Brain Balance by Charlotte Labee. This is another Dutch audiobook, and she's an author, podcaster, YouTuber, influencer kind of thing, who is, I think she even did a TED Talk at some point, and she is sort of like, again, known for like giving advice, being a coach to people who go through burnouts and stuff, and how she's done research about things. And this book, you can't even call it a book. I only gave it 2 stars because it was incredibly frustrating for me. It's sort of like she just tells her life story and tells you what lessons she's learned and why she came to the insight she's come to, and she sells it as if that's then the case for everybody else. But she's been a professional model. She participated in like Miss Universe, I think it was. Like, she has privilege and doesn't realize it. Like, if you read Prince Harry, at least he knows that the kind of life that he led was completely insane and not everyone's reality. But this girl just needs a reality check, because what goes for you doesn't go for everyone. And yet she sells it as is. And what got really frustrating is that there were points in the book where she just refers to the program she sells. So this book was written to promote her program and to make even more money off of you, which is why I'm really glad I read it through my Storytel account, which I just pay a subscription fee every month, and it gives me access to lots of books. But yeah, she does have a new book out, which I'm still interested for, but if it's anything like this, I know I won't like it. This is just one of those like easy cash grabbing kind of self-help books that a lot of these like influencer fitness people kind of do just to make money off of people. And this was like absolutely like, 1 star I always find a bit like, people have put effort into this, so that's why it's still 2 stars, but this could have been a 1 star because it's bad. A complete surprise to me was Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. So this is a book that I saw making the rounds on BookTube a while ago, and I had sort of like just put it in the register of my brain somewhere, like, oh, that might be nice. I saw it on Storytel, liked it, as in to put it on my bookshelf to see if I might be able to read it at some point. And I like this a lot. I mean, I don't normally listen to a lot of fiction, like novels and things, but this was really doable. It was very enjoyable to listen to. The narrator was stunning, so props to the narrator of this. And this was such a lovely sort of like dark fantasy fairy tale kind of retelling. So in this story, we meet a young woman who, in order to try and save her sister from a very cruel prince, goes through this whole thing where she weaves a cloak of nettles, she creates a dog of bones, and then she needs to catch moonlight in a jar, I believe. Those are her 3 tasks, and then she will get help to help her sister. And this is what I wanted Well of Ascension to be, in a sense, because this is a quest. So she is on this quest, but we find her when she's almost completed her 3 tasks, and then she goes off to save her sister. But we get flashbacks of how she got to the point of having to complete these tasks and how she does it, and then eventually the story does move on. This was really well written, endearing, dark, like I said. This isn't like, trigger warnings are there for sure. There's a lot of abuse, like that's being referred to as well. There are curses involved. It's dark, 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 dark. But that's what I liked. And our main character is flawed. She's not perfect. But along the way, she meets a couple of really lovely characters. She has her bone dog, of course, but then she meets the Dust Wife, who has a cursed hen. There's a demon inside it. They meet, they pick up her aunt or her fairy godmother along the way, who can do like lots of magic as well. And then they meet this knight who has fled his country because he murdered some people, and so he couldn't go home. And he's like, yeah, I'll tag along. So you have this ragtag sort of group of travelers to find this kingdom where this sister lives, to try and like see if they can have a go at the prince and save the sister. And the story just feels a bit unfinished at the end because it's not like nicely wrapped up with a bow around it. But I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars because I did really like it. And then I listened to This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. I believe this was turned into a TV series or a movie as well. And the actor who plays him in the series or movie is an actor who I kind of like, sort of like following here and there and watches things. But I knew this was a book, so I was like, I want to read the book first. And then I found it on Storytel. This was a 3-star read for me because it gets a bit like repetitive at times, but this is just sort of like memoirs of Adam Kay as he was going through his medical career in the NHS healthcare system of the UK. And it's just very realistic, and a lot of the reviews of this are like, I can't stand him, he's arrogant, he's this. I'm like, you really don't understand British self-deprecating humor, and there's a lot of that in it. It was very fast-paced, really enjoyable, and I think especially in the light of the NHS strikes that have been going on in the UK, I think this is just an incredibly important book to listen to if you want to understand the kind of pressure that healthcare providers are under in the UK. And I think there is a similar pattern going on here in the Netherlands, but also in other countries for sure. Where it's just this pressure to perform, and you're just not even being paid fair wages for like the amount of time and effort you need to put in. And that's definitely why he left the profession, and then he wrote a book about it, which I think a lot of people are also angry with him about it. A bit like Prince Harry, like people just don't appreciate it if you come from a certain system and then you do this like tell-all kind of thing. I think a lot of people didn't like that about it. I mean, this was enjoyable, like I said, but at a certain point, it did, like, I get the point, but then it kept going, which is why it was 3 stars for me. And then finally, the last thing I listened to is Summer of Blood, The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 by Dan Jones. This was, again, a really pleasant narrator to listen to, but I only gave it 3 stars. A lot of nonfiction I listen to is 3 stars because I'm just never wowed by it. Like, usually the writing style is a bit meh. And with this, it was a historical nonfiction about what happened in 1389. I'd heard of this like through the grapevine, but how this actually worked and how it came down, it was really nicely done, but it was very chronological. So I would have liked there to be more storytelling to this. Then I think I might have liked it better, because this was a little bit frustrating at times. You think it's over, we're done. No. Then we get the entire story of how it went like a little further north. And no. We still need to talk about these guys too. But I think in terms of like English history, I think he did a good job here talking about all of these things. But yeah, I now know a bit more about the Peasants' Revolt, and I didn't know anything about it before, so I've learned something new. And that was the last book I actually finished. I'm currently in the midst of Uprooted by Naomi Novik. So many of you were saying, oh, I think you might love it. So I put it on my winter to read list almost. So I was like, I just have to pick that up. So that's the physical copy I'm currently stuck in. And I'm currently listening to, again, trigger warning story. But a couple of years ago, they found this family in the middle of like the Dutch countryside who had never been outside. Like, these kids had never been registered anywhere. And the eldest, well, he's not the eldest son, but the eldest son that they found at the time, because there were more kids, but they had already left home. But he wrote a book about his experience growing up, and sort of like never having been to school and doing all those things. And his dad was heavily into his own brand of religion, and he sort of tells you about like how that went and how he experienced that growing up. So I'm currently, I think, just over halfway done with this. It's not a very long book at all, just a couple of hours. So I know I can finish this pretty soon. But yeah, again, a lot of like sort of physical and mental abuse, and it's sort of like, it's this like cult like situation that he's come from. So, but it was a book that was very highly rated on all the Dutch book lists last year. So I was like, when I saw it on Storytel, I was like, I might give it a listen. Again, yeah, something that's quite harrowing, and yeah, just a sad story to listen to, really. So yeah, those are all of the books that I'm currently in the midst of. These were the books I read. I'm definitely going to be reading some more again, and then I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to do March, but April for sure, we're going to do another one of these, and I'm going to tell you about all of the bits I read. So let me know in a comment down below what you're reading. I would love to know, and then I look forward to seeing you again next week when I have a new video for you, and that time we're going to be talking about fashion. So I hope you're here for it, and then I look forward to seeing you then. See you next week. Bye-bye.